You think you know your wife, until you watch her through a hidden camera. Don't forget to subscribe. This is Isabelle's story. The house looked perfect, not just tidy, but engineered, everything in its place, every pillow fluffed, every drawer silently sliding shut. The kind of home you'd find in a smart living brochure, voice-controlled lighting, facial recognition locks, temperature set precisely by schedule. Nathan had built it like a shrine to security, a love letter to control. Isabelle had once been impressed by it. The way the lights knew when she entered. The way the music changed when her voice registered sadness. The way Nathan made her feel like she was being taken care of. All watched, depending on the day. They met at a tech conference 7 years ago. She was a guest speaker on visual creativity in early childhood education. He was the keynote, charismatic, brilliant, wearing the kind of suit that made other men shrink. He smiled at her from the audience, then found her backstage. Within a year, she had left her teaching job and moved into his house outside Seattle. Within 2, she was pregnant, and after that, she stopped teaching altogether. It wasn't something they planned. At least, she hadn't. You'll have time to go back, he said, once he starts preschool. But by the time their son turned 3, Isabelle was no longer sure she belonged in a classroom. She wasn't sure where she belonged at all. Nathan traveled often, California mostly, contracts with aerospace firms, biometric labs. He once joked he knew how to track any human anywhere, even from space. She laughed. Then she stopped laughing. The house obeyed her, but not in a way that felt free. It monitored her moods. It catalogued her routines. It anticipated things she hadn't even noticed about herself. And sometimes, when she paused in the kitchen with a glass of wine, she imagined the walls blinking back at her. She never found the cameras. Not directly, but she knew they were there. The mirror in the hallway tilted slightly when she walked past. The speakers always clicked right before turning on. And there was that one time she sang aloud in the shower, only to have the exact same song start playing through the system. Coincidence? She doubted it. She started whispering to herself in the bathroom, just in case, just to say the things she didn't dare out loud. I'm not happy. I miss being touched without being scheduled. I miss being seen. Nathan would FaceTime at night. Quick calls, more of a check-in than a connection. Their son's bedtime became the script, kisses, waves, lights out. Then Nathan would say something like, "Security logs look good, don't forget to arm the doors," and hang up. Sometimes Isabelle sat in the dark for hours afterward, the wine warm in her hand, the silence thick. She started dressing more carefully. Not for Nathan, for herself. Soft fabrics, thinner straps, lipstick before noon. Her reflection became less of a stranger. But the eyes, they were still tired. Not from motherhood. From invisibility. It was on a Thursday when the pipe in the guest bathroom started dripping. A soft, rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat, or a warning. She told Nathan, of course. He said he'd file a maintenance request through the home service system. But she didn't want a repair through his app. She didn't want someone who came pre-screened, pre-cleared, pre-watched. So she Googled, incognito tab, private browsing. She found a local handyman service with no corporate affiliation. Just a man named Mason with solid reviews and no online booking system. She called. He had a voice like gravel and ocean. "Tomorrow morning work for you?" "Yes," she said, too quickly. After hanging up, she cleared the call log, deleted the browsing history, wiped fingerprints off the screen. Habit, maybe, or guilt, or survival. That night, she unplugged the hallway mirror, just in case. The next morning, she made herself tea but didn't drink it. She wore a robe, but a thinner one than usual. Her hair was loose, her skin perfumed. When Mason arrived, she opened the door like she wasn't expecting him. "Hi, you must be Mason." He nodded, wiped his boots before stepping in. He was younger than she thought. 30, maybe, strong arms, calm eyes, the kind of man who didn't check his phone during conversation. She led him to the bathroom. As he unpacked his tools, she lingered at the mirror. It just started dripping 2 nights ago," she said, watching him in the reflection. He ducked under the sink. She watched his back move. Then she walked out, left the door open, not wide, just enough. The camera on the bookshelf, angled toward the hallway, had been tilted slightly that morning when she dusted. Now it caught just the edge of the doorway. Nothing more. She poured herself wine. Before noon, no one would know. The sound of metal tapping against pipe. His breath under the cabinet. Her breath at the threshold. She closed her eyes. No one would know, but someone would watch. And maybe, for the first time in years, that was the same thing as being seen. The knock was punctual. 9 a.m. sharp. Just like he said, Isabelle had already been up for 2 hours. Not because she needed to be, but because she couldn't sleep. The morning had passed in slow motion, a shower that lasted too long. A robe that clung just a little too closely, and a bottle of red she uncorked with the kind of deliberateness normally reserved for confessions. She opened the door. Mason stood there, exactly as she remembered his voice, grounded, quiet, unassuming. His shirt clung to his shoulders from the mist outside, and his eyes carried that tired alertness of a man used to early mornings and heavy tools. "Hi," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Come in." He nodded and stepped inside. No fuss, no small talk. He didn't scan the house the way Nathan did when he walked in, as if checking for violations. Mason just followed her lead. She led him to the guest bathroom, as he dropped his toolbox onto the floor with a dull thud. She leaned against the doorframe. "Drip's been driving me crazy," she said, lifting her wineglass. She caught his glance at the drink. "Bit early for that, isn't it?" he said, half smiling. She shrugged. "It's 5 o'clock somewhere." A silence passed between them. Not uncomfortable, just tight. He ducked under the sink, wrench in hand. Isabelle let her gaze trace his back. The way the shirt stretched when he moved. The curve of his neck as he tilted his head to examine the pipe. She turned, walked to the hallway, and pulled the living room curtain shut. Not all the way, just enough to shift the light. Just enough to say, "Something's different." When she came back, she brought a second glass. "Want some? I promise I won't tell." He hesitated, looked up at her from beneath the cabinet. "Sure, why not?" She poured it slow. Mason stood, wiping his hands on a rag, taking the glass without touching her fingers. He drank, watching her over the rim. Isabelle walked past him, the tie on her robe loosened slightly. Not by accident, not entirely on purpose either. She stood by the fogging mirror, her breath clouding the glass. And she wrote a letter only she could read. "I miss being seen." He caught the words in the mirror. Or maybe just her eyes. The sound of dripping faded. It hadn't stopped. It had just become irrelevant. She turned around. He hadn't moved, still holding the glass, still watching her like a man unsure if he should step forward or apologize and leave. She stepped toward him. "Do you fix more than pipes?" she whispered. Not because she was trying to be coy, but because her voice might break if it went louder. His eyes darkened, not with lust, with warning. "Mrs. Isabelle," she interrupted, "just Isabelle." The robe slipped, a shoulder, then more. He didn't stop her, he didn't ask. He set the glass down slowly on the counter. When their mouths met, it wasn't urgent, it was inevitable. Years of silence and restraint breaking like old plaster. The steam of the wine, the scent of her skin, the guilt that hadn't arrived yet, but was already circling like fog on a window. They moved together slowly at first, then with the kind of urgency that only comes when you know something is profoundly, beautifully wrong. Outside, the camera on the bookshelf blinked once. Inside, no one noticed. He pulled her close, she pulled him closer. Their breath fogged the mirror. The glass steamed, the wineglass fell, shattering. Neither of them looked. The house didn't scream, it simply recorded. When it was over, Mason stepped back, flushed and unsure. Isabelle wrapped the robe around herself, but loosely, not with shame. He reached for his tools. She reached for his hand. "Stay," she said, not a plea, a statement. He looked at her, eyes clouded. Does your husband know you called me? No, and if he did, he'd send someone with a badge and a background check. Not someone with real hands. That made him pause, then nod. I should go. You will, just not yet. He didn't argue. They stood in the haze of it all, sweat, steam, and something worse, clarity. She had closed the curtains. But not tightly enough. And somewhere, beneath the hum of smart home silence, a camera remembered everything. Even what she tried to forget. Nathan had always trusted his systems more than his instincts. The house he built for Isabelle was a marvel, every appliance connected. Every corner covered. Not for control, he would tell friends, but for peace of mind. For security, for safety. But technology doesn't filter emotion. It only records it. It started with a notification. Motion detected in the living room. Timestamped 3:17 p.m. Nathan was in a hotel room in Palo Alto, half listening to a presentation via Zoom, when his tablet blinked with the alert. Normally, he would have dismissed it. Isabelle moved around a lot during the day. But this time, something made him pause. He clicked the video. The footage was partial. The curtain had been drawn. Light uneven, but shapes moved. A body, two, perhaps, one stepping back, one leaning in. There was no sound, but there was something unmistakable in the curve of Isabelle's shoulder, the tension of her back as she turned, half covered in a robe that didn't look tight enough. He rewound, slowed it. A glass on the counter, a shadow, a shirt that wasn't his. His breath caught, more out of confusion than pain. Not yet anger, just disbelief. He opened his security panel remotely, selected a date range, began playback from each of the smart cameras he'd installed, discreetly, long before Isabelle ever suspected. The bookshelf camera, the ceiling light in the hall, the one hidden inside the faux speaker beside the mirror. He had told her they were just for emergencies. Now, they were evidence. The footage didn't scream, it whispered. Long glances, a wine bottle opened too early, a man's hand brushing her waist, Isabelle laughing in a way Nathan hadn't heard in years. And then, the bathroom, a blur of skin, the robe, a kiss. He watched it all, each clip adding weight to a stone forming in his chest. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was how easily she let herself become someone else. Someone he didn't know, someone who hadn't even tried to hide. But it wasn't only her. Nathan paused the video, zoomed in. The man, the plumber, Mason. He recognized him from an invoice months ago, routine maintenance. Mason had good reviews, worked freelance, no company logo, clean record. Nathan remembered approving the appointment from the app Isabelle used. She'd made it sound innocuous. A small leak. But what he saw wasn't a leak. It was a flood, silent, steady, rotting everything from the inside. He downloaded the footage, encrypted it, stored it on 2 drives. One for backup, one for the lawyer. A pang of guilt flickered in him. And then vanished. This wasn't spying, this was defense. A house wasn't a home if it held secrets under its roof. He sat back in the hotel room's stiff chair. Lights dimmed, the glow of betrayal flickering against his face. He hadn't cried in years. Didn't now, but his jaw clenched until his molars ached. He picked up his phone. No message to Isabelle, no confrontation, not yet. Instead, he opened a second app, a backup, one she didn't know about. It accessed the hallway mic. He listened. Silence. Then, the faintest whisper. Her voice. Soft. Laughter. Talking to herself, maybe, or someone still there. Nathan closed the app, his face blank, his hands steady. A week ago, he'd suspected her of flirting with an ex-boyfriend through late-night texts. He'd read too much into emojis, wondered if nostalgia was pulling her toward an old flame. He was wrong. It wasn't the past she missed. It was something new, something raw, and he had it all on tape. The irony burned deeper than betrayal. The house meant to protect had become the judge. The cameras he installed not to catch her, but to comfort her, had become silent witnesses. She hadn't known, but the lens never blinked. It simply waited. And now, so would he. Nathan didn't speak when he entered the courtroom. He didn't look at Isabelle. He didn't glance at the lawyer beside him. He simply walked to the monitor, inserted the drive, and clicked play. The room dimmed. The first video rolled. A blurred frame. The living room camera. Isabelle pouring wine, brushing her hair back, her robe falling slightly at the shoulder. Then, another figure entered. Mason. A hushed gasp from someone in the gallery. Isabelle's lawyer shifted in his seat. The second clip began. The hallway. Mason walking out. Isabelle behind him, her hand briefly touching the small of his back. No audio, but it didn't need sound. The visual was enough. The third. The kitchen. Isabelle laughing, head tilted, hair tied loosely, a different woman from the one Nathan married. Lighter, looser, someone he hadn't seen in years. But now, she was a stranger he could never unsee. Isabelle sat frozen, hands clenched in her lap, eyes refusing to rise from the floor. Nathan finally spoke, voice level, "This is what I found when I accessed the home system I built for us. For safety, for trust." He turned to the judge. "There are timestamps, matching logs. Nothing was manipulated. I didn't want to find this. But it was there, always had been." Isabelle tried to speak, but her voice broke. He looked at me like I was still human. That's all. I just wanted to feel alive again." Nathan didn't raise his voice. He didn't sneer. He just looked at her as if she were something fragile he'd once held dear but could no longer recognize. "I made that house smart, Isabelle," he said, "but I didn't know I married a ghost." Silence. Even the judge seemed to hesitate before signaling the court reporter. The opposing lawyer didn't argue. Mason, subpoenaed, uncomfortable, and out of place in a tie and borrowed jacket, confirmed he'd believed it was a simple job. He hadn't known Isabelle's husband was recording. Hadn't known there were cameras everywhere. His voice cracked. "She told me her husband never came home. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean for this." Nathan didn't flinch. The judge ruled in Nathan's favor. Immediate separation. Custody discussions pending. The footage served as primary evidence. When court adjourned, Isabelle stood, alone. Nathan walked past her without a word. She turned, whispering, "I didn't plan for it to be this way." But he was already gone. The smart house they once called home had captured more than infidelity. It had exposed the distance, the emptiness, the unspoken truths neither had dared say aloud. And the footage, frame by frame, had ended it all. Isabelle no longer looked at screens the same way. Not after the trial, not after the footage, not after the silence that followed the final verdict. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the less expensive side of town, far from the glass. Steel and voice activated everything of the house that used to be hers. There were no smart locks, no surveillance apps, no connected appliances humming quietly behind her back. Just a metal key, a worn-out couch, and the low hum of an old fridge that made no effort to listen. Her son, Jamie, lived with Nathan now, 5 years old and full of questions she wasn't allowed to answer anymore. The court decided stability favored a man who could control his environment, who could prove, down to the second, where he was and what he had seen. Isabelle couldn't argue with wires. And neither could the judge. On her worst days, she searched for Mason online, not to find him, just to know he hadn't disappeared entirely. But Mason had made himself vanish. No forwarding address, no new license, not even a whisper on Facebook. As if the moment that footage was played, he knew the shadows weren't worth staying in. There was something cruelly poetic about her fall. She had been the wife of a man who wired every corner of their home for safety. And it was that very web that caught her. Every look, every touch, every sigh preserved in digital clarity. Her name showed up on forums, tech blogs, Reddit threads, cautionary YouTube compilations, not just as the woman who cheated, but as a lesson, as metadata, as a reminder that smart homes remember what even the heart wants to forget. Sometimes, late at night, she would pace her hallway, instinctively avoiding where cameras might have once been placed. Her hand would reach for the light switch with a slow, silent caution, Her body still wired for shame. She had unplugged everything. There was no Wi-Fi, no smart speakers. She wouldn't even own a phone with facial recognition. When a neighbor offered to help her install a video doorbell, she refused with a quiet, haunted smile. "I don't need the door to see who's coming," she said. "No one is." She kept the curtains closed. Not out of fear, but fatigue. Her image had been public enough. One afternoon, she stood in the corner of the kitchen, staring at the tile. She traced the grout lines with her eyes, the way one might follow fault lines before an earthquake. The walls weren't talking, but she could still feel them listening. That night, Isabelle poured herself a glass of wine, not because she wanted to feel glamorous or alive, but because it was habit, a relic of who she used to be. She sat in the only chair she owned, facing the television she never turned on. She whispered to no one. "He wired the house to keep me safe, but the wires ended up tying my secrets to the walls forever." The apartment was quiet, but in her memory, a red recording light still blinked. Sometimes, the smartest homes can't predict the D, but not every secret is caught on camera. Next time on Infidelity Chronicles. A storm hit Charleston. Helena was a widow, lonely, grieving. The plumber came to help her clean up the mess, but they created a new one together, until the day her son walked in, and subscribe, because